Welcome back to week 5 of the Robotics for All Python class. Last week we learned about conditional logic and while loops. This week we're going to talk about for loops, break, and continue. Before we get started, please open up REPL and follow along with the video. For loops are used to traverse or visit each element of a list or string or repeat a task a certain number of times. Lists and strings are known as iterables, or any data in Python that can be used with a loop. Another example is a dictionary. The syntax is for var in iterable colon, and the code that you want to have executed will be on the lines after the colon and indented. The difference between for loops and while loops is that for loops will run for a specific number of times, while while loops will continue to run for as long as the condition is true. The syntax for a for loop using the range function is for I in range, and then in parentheses a comma b, and then a colon, where a is the starting number and b is the one more than desired ending number. You can use the range function to loop through the code a specific number of times. The range function represents a list starting at one number and ending at one less than the ending number. If the range function has 1 as a and 9 as b, then the list will take on the numbers from 1 to 8. So if we have a range function as the iterable, and then we have a print statement within it that prints out the value of I, then the loop variable, which is named I, will take on each number in this range and print it out. So what will be printed out is all the numbers from 1 to 8. For loops using the range function are helpful when you either want a variable that is equivalent to the index of the iterable, given that the range function starting number is 0, or when you don't have an iterable and you want to loop through the code a specific number of times. In Python, the syntax for a for each loop is the same as a normal for loop, and it's when the statements within the loop use the value of var, which takes on the value of each of the iterable's members. For example, I'd be printing out what var equals each loop. Let's start with a list as the iterable. So if we have a list named lang underscore list, and it has the items English, Spanish, and French, and then we have a for loop, and the loop variable can be named anything, and in this case we'll name it lang, and it will take on the value of each item in lang underscore list. So first will equal English, then Spanish, and then French. And we'll have a print statement within it, printing out what lang equals. For each item in the list, the code within the loop is executed, so the output is English, Spanish, and French. This is an example of a for each loop. For loops can also be used to traverse through strings. This time the iterable is the string robotics, and the variable name is letter. So for letter in the string robotics, letter will take on the value of each letter in the string. So first R, then O, and then B, and so on. And we'll use a print statement to print out each letter one by one. So we'll press run, and robotics is printed out letter by letter. A break statement exits out of the loop and is usually done when a certain condition is met. They can be in for and while loops. The code for a break statement is simply the word break. For example, if we have a list named nums, whose items are the numbers from 1 through 5, and we have a for loop with num as the loop variable and nums as the iterable, we can use the break statement together with an if statement to stop the for loop if num is greater than 2. If we have a print statement after the if statement that prints out num, the output will be 1 and 2. 2 is the last number printed because 3 is greater than 2, meaning that the if statement's condition became true and the break statement was executed, stopping the loop before 3 could be printed out. A continue statement skips the remainder of the loop and jumps to the next iteration. They can be used in for and while loops. The code for a continue statement is simply the word continue. And for the example, we're going to use the same code as the previous one for the break statement and just change two things. One, we're going to change the break statement for a continue statement. And two, we're going to change the condition. Instead of when num is greater than 2, we're going to change it to when num is equivalent to 3. This time, the loop will not stop when num equals 3 and instead just skip the rest of the loop, which is the print statement, and skip to the next iteration, which is when num equals 4. So if we run the code, this time 1, 2, 4, and 5 are printed out with only 3 not printed. That concludes the week 5 video. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you in the next class.